First thing I'm going to do, make sure my paper is face down. Put glue, just a little layer of glue all over the surface. And this is just to help the paper not slip while we're wrapping it up. Now this side needs to go face down on the white or the back of my paper. Try to put it in the middle. Next thing I'm going to do is fold over to the edges. And I have a lot of extra space here, so what I'm actually going to do is cut just right to the corner here a little tab right up against there. Doesn't have to be perfect, but try to make sure it doesn't come out too far this way. I'm going to add a little bit of glue to those tabs of paper. Don't want to add too much because then it'll squirt out everywhere. Hold it down for a moment or two so the glue gets a chance to stick before you move on to the next one. And then on the edges here, if I were to fold this over, I would have a lot sticking out. So to make sure none of my paper is sticking out, I'm going to cut in a diagonal line. It should look kind of like an envelope, or if you've ever wrapped a package before, or a present, you have those nice corners right to the corner. And I'm going to do the same thing. Put glue on these two tabs. And then I'll do the other cover. Once I have two, my covers are finished. I'm ready to attach them with tape. If we put our covers right next to each other so they're touching, we won't have any space to actually open and close or add paper. So the way that we're taping it, we're going to leave a gap of space where there will only be tape. Okay, so I made a mistake on the inside of my cover, so I had to pull the tape off, so you might get some rips. If that happens to you, it's okay. The inside of the cover, and we're going to cover it up anyway. So try and keep a gap of space between your two covers and make sure that they match up. One of them's not crooked like that. And try and make sure you have overlap on each side with your tape. And rub down each side. And the further apart you make your space, the more paper you can actually fit in your sketchbook later. Now I'm going to flip it over and wrap tape all along this side. And I want them to overhang, so it should be longer than my sketchbook. And I carefully lay it down. Try and line it up as best you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. And smooth it down. I'm going to flip this over once more. And now my job is to make sure that the feet are covering any additional sticky parts of tape. So my outside will look like this. I have a nice binding right here to add more paper to. And the inside is here. Now my inside, because it's a little all over the place, I'm going to glue in some cover pages. Now my paper's a little bit too big. I'd like to actually see the edge of my paper from the outside. if that's something you'd like. Take a pencil and mark how much you need to cut off if you're going to leave a little gap of space. So like up here, I want to be right there. Oh. And looking here, I don't know about there. Make sure it's covering everything, looks good. And then I'll glue this to the inside. I think I'm going to use a glue stick because I don't want my paper to get too wrinkly from a glue bottle. But we may be using different glue. Make sure to get all over, especially the edges. Smooth it with the palm of your hand. Do it a few times to help it stay in place. And then do the same thing to the other side. Oh, and you know what? If you'd been a little bit smarter than me, you could have cut both papers together. But since I didn't, I'm going to have to measure again. It's okay. You might be able to see I overcut this one here. But I think later on when I'm decorating my sketchbook, I could maybe even add a trim with different colored paper to kind of hide that miscut back here. Now your cover is ready to get paper added inside. To make your signatures, stack paper in a big pile, however many number that we end up telling you. Fold it in half so that it will fit inside the cover. And we're going to be poking 5 holes in our center. Now to make sure the paper doesn't slip, I'm going to clip it on 2 sides. Now we might have rulers, or you could.
Good morning, Jamie. Would you unlock A124, the special ed office by the gym? Thank you.
Now we might have rulers, or you can eyeball it, but we want to put 1 dot in the middle of our sketchbook, or 1 hole, and then we're going to go maybe an inch in on each side, and then we're going to do 2 last dots in between the ones we made. So I should have 5 dots in total. Take her all and poke holes right through. It might be easier sometimes to lift it up, and I kind of twist it back and forth until you see it poke through. Be careful when you're poking that your finger's not over the hole. And try not to poke too far, because the further you go, the wider the hole will get. After you have your 5 holes, you're gonna need some thread. I would try and do at least double the length of the binding. And I'm even gonna do a 1/3 length just in case. Depending on how wide your eyelet is, it might take a little wiggling, but thread your needle, line up the paper, and I would put it on one side of the binding, so again you have space for more signatures next to them if you want to add them in. If you're having a bit of trouble keeping your paper from running, around, I'm repinning my paper to the cover so it doesn't slip around on me. It's tape on the bottom too, because it's slipping on me still.
Now that the paper is secured to the cover, I'm taking the awl and I'm pressing through the holes I've already made so that it pierces through the tape on my cover as well. Make sure that it's through the tape only and not the chipboard.
Once the holes have been pierced, start threading, binding your book. First step is to go down through the middle and leave a tail. You might have to pull the needle a little bit to get it to go through. I would leave about this much. I can always cut it smaller later. But I'm going to come up through this second hole. I had to wiggle the needle a little bit because the holes might not quite match up. So just shift it around if you need to. And now I'm going back down through the top hole. I'm going to pull it mostly tight, but I don't want to pull too hard or that tail's going to come out. Now I'm going to take from here and I'm going to go back through the second hole I was just at. Now here's where it might get a little loose because I'm pulling again. So I'm going to hold on to the tail and tighten both ends. I'm pulling here and I'm pulling here. Now instead of going back down through the hole, we're going to skip over and go down to this one. And then I'm going to come back up through the bottom. Now the last thing, I'm pulling it tight. I have to cover these two. I have to cover this space, so from here back over to here. And the last thing is to bring the two threads together. I'm going to go from this space up to the middle, which is the only space left that doesn't have a stitch. I can see this one's loose, so I'm going to want to pull that tight. Make sure it's as tight as you can get it on the inside and the outside. And then you can cut off your excess and tie it a few times in the middle, really tight. And I would still leave a little bit of a tail. I like cutting mine a little shorter than this, but you can also take the binding and wrap it underneath the thread if you want. Take your clips off. And we're going to sketchbook. And you can see the binding, there's room